system that we have is meant to crush you. You are never meant to grow. Understand these people. Uhuru Kenyatta wanted to become an empire. He was really a dynasty. His intention was to crush the economy. Then he's the only person with money. When you are crushed, now you start buying all the key sectors of the economy. You all work for him. You need a house. You go to his buildings. You need to buy milk. You need to acquire access a service. He's there. William Ruto is trying to become a dynasty and an emperor at the same time. So he prefers a development model that is camouflaged as foreigners coming in, but somewhere along the way, he is the one with the fractional ownership, not the people of Kenya. What we call four pockets of lenders. Number one are the bilaterals, that's IMF and with foreign countries, SIDA, JICA. Then number two, we have now the new emerging area called the sovereign bonds. These are offered by international banks, commercial banks. That's where Eurobonds fall. And this, even the World Bank has warned African countries and countries in the global south against the sovereign bonds, because sovereign bonds, you find the terms are very onerous. You are being told you have to pay the Eurobond within 6 years. Interest rate initially was 5.4%. Now when they did the refinance last year, interest rate is now 10.35%. So you see that, and you must pay it within 5 years. The interest rates for the sovereign bonds, because they are given by commercial banks looking for profits, are very onerous and they are very hard. The bilateral terms, where there are concessions, you may be told even grace period, you are given a long period, even 10 years, repayment period, even 20 years, interest rate 2%. Then we have domestic, as number three, domestic debt. This is now the new elephant competing line to line with the sovereign bonds. Domestic bonds are the ones that are floated here every so often, the treasury bills and bonds, which governments are taking. In fact, last year, Kenya government was borrowing at an average of 17% interest rate. The moment you start taking loans at the domestic market at 17% interest rate, what it means is that the private individual, if he goes to that market, the banks have no appetite to lend to him. They will give an interest rate of 25%, 20%, 25%. Which business are you going to do in a shrinking economy where the interest rate is 25%? That is immediately an non-performing loan. You'll never pay it. And why are the interest rates so high with our banks? It's because they prefer to lend to government and they don't want to lend to you. But the oxymoron in all of this is that these banks don't print money. Whose money are they lending to the Kenya government? It is your money. It is the Kenyan people who deposit in those banks. It is the government and its agencies that deposit money in those banks. So government takes your money, banks take your money, take it to your government and lend it at 17% interest rate. Then your government comes to you to raise your taxes, to pay interest of 17% on your money that the same bank lent to it. That even part of it was that same government's money that was deposited. And the classical case was the housing levy. When the housing PS Hinga said, we have taken 40 billion to buy treasury bonds. Government has collected money and there are 40 billion. They've raised their taxes to raise housing levy. There are 40 billion that they've decided they are going to the banks to buy treasury bonds. Buy from who? From the same government. Then ask you to pay higher interest rate. So understand, why is this happening? Very simple. The private banks, when they charge you 17% interest rate, they are private banks, private entities. They are not susceptible to the same audits that government agency will be. So this 17% interest rate, I am sure somewhere along the way, the bank maybe retains only 5% interest rate. 12% interest rate of the interest rate is shared by cartels in government and the political establishment. But who pays for it? You, taxpayer. So domestic lending shouldn't be there. And if you ask even the banks here locally, tell me you've taken this treasury bill or bond. Tell me which project it is funding. According to our books, we owe you 5.4 trillion today. Show me which project you are funding when you floated this bond. Did not show you. So why should we pay it? Show me the parliamentary approval. Here are the Appropriations Act passed by the Parliament of Kenya in the last 10 years, now 12 years. Show me where the Kenyan people said we are going to borrow 200 billion from the domestic market. And Parliament passed it in the Appropriations Act, and then they indicated which project it was going to fund. None. Why should we pay it? The last pocket of loans are the Chinese loans. And Chinese loans, depending, that's, for example, the one that funded the SGR. They are infrastructure specific. In most cases, the Chinese loans are not as onerous as the domestic or the sovereign bonds. The terms are normally very favorable. So we can still access the market. But what, for example, is our model that is different? And to pick, for example, JKI. William Ruto decides that he wants to go to, and even use also, if we can even use SGR as an example, even though the project itself does not make any economic sense to the Republic of Kenya. If you take JKI and you wanted to build, to improve it, what will stop us from saying our funding model will be, we don't have the money in our books. We are going to float an infrastructure bond to the people of Kenya. And in between also float a diaspora bond. We need 50 billion shillings for JKI upgrade, or we need 100 billion. Ask the people of Kenya to go to the stock exchange to buy that bond. Ask Kenyans in the diaspora, who are one of the largest contributors of Forex, to buy a diaspora bond to improve JKI. JKI will never make a loss. JKI, anybody who walks in there pays money. For as long as flights are taking off, it will never make a loss. So a diasporan will say, I have my little $200,000 here, let me buy this bond. But in the process, you end up owning your national asset. You're a fractional owner of JKI. But Ruto prefers to go to Adani. So the Indian investor, who I'm sure somebody in Kenya is hiding behind, becomes the owner of JKI. When will a Kenyan ever own a national asset if you don't give them an opportunity? So there are so many funding models that you can pursue that brings Kenyans onto the table, and they start taking fractional ownership of some of these assets. When Adani invests in Ketraco, you want to tell me Kenyans cannot raise an energy bond and buy fractional ownership of that energy system? People are working all over the world. People are working here in Kenya. They are looking forward to earning from their country. So when in some countries, like in the Middle East, you hear that people don't earn a salary for not working, it's not that they're not working. It is that their governments have made it possible for them to acquire shares in key infrastructural projects. So they are normally paid monthly dividends in advance. They are earning from those shares that they own. But our model in Kenya is totally different, because the system that we have is meant to crush you. You are never meant to grow. Understand these people. Uhuru Kenyatta wanted to become an empire. He was really a dynasty. His intention was to crush the economy. Then he's the only person with money. When you are crushed, now you start buying all the key sectors of the economy. You all work for him. You need a house. You go to his buildings. You need to buy milk. You need to acquire access service. He's there. William Ruto is trying to become a dynasty and an emperor at the same time. So he prefers a development model that is camouflaged as foreigners coming in, but somewhere along the way, he is the one with the fractional ownership, not the people of Kenya. And that is why, in fact, let me tie to the question that was asked by Rose. The collaboration, whether we are able to collaborate and work. Even if we are going to pursue coalitions, it is important these coalitions are informed by an ideology. If somebody believes in the existing model, why should Safina Party be part of that coalition? Because as we believe, our development should be people-driven, not government. Government should just be a facilitator. What is the barrier that is hindering the people to grow economically? We remove that barrier as government, but allow the individual to grow. But if somebody believes that should be government that comes and says to Metenga 10 billion, to Metenga 500, to Metenga, it can't. That will be a coalition of convenience. We will now be selfish leaders. We will not be pursuing economic growth of the nation. We'll be pursuing our own personal, individual aggrandizements. So coalitions, just for the sake of winning elections, I don't think I will be part of it. I don't even think my party leader will be part of it. Coalitions should be about the ideology that is shared, that we are all taking a commitment that our government is about the people, and genuinely so, not for purposes of winning an election. Of what need is it to win an election when the people you are going to lead over are dying because of lack of opportunities? And the final question was about the Azimio coalition from Rose. What can we do to send the electoral system? Very simple. Minor Kiai. The Minor Kiai case settles our election system. And our vote at the polling station is final. And the relaying of results and declarations made at the constituency levels will sort out all the problems. For as long as we still maintain boomers, we will not succeed. Because I have worked on elections in Kenya now for almost 15 years. And I've done elections across the continent. I can tell you, in terms of laws, in terms of regulations, we have it all. What we don't have is the accountability mechanisms for that election. So work on the accountability mechanisms. And the easiest mechanism is break down elections to be done at the constituency level. Apply minor KI case so that every constituency will declare the results. And if there's any dispute, that dispute should be done at the constituency level. Thank you very much, Hilary.
Thank you so much, Wakili.